Hello and welcome to a very special occasion today. We have the privilege of having this talk by Mr. Robin Speculin, a very eminent speaker and a global authority on digital strategy implementation. Uh, we are rejoiced that he is joining us from live from Singapore at the occasion of the launch of his just released book, which has created a storm in the literature of digital transformation. Uh, this talk today by Robin is based on that book. So this is here it is. You can see it. I'm holding it in my hands. Uh, Only received it 2 days ago from Robin, and some of you who had joined and registered initially will be getting the book courtesy TBS, which is the leading banking technology company of Pakistan. Um, So we have planned this session in a way where first Mr. Shahzad Shahid, who is the session chairman and he is the CEO of TPS, will be introducing the speaker and the topic today. So Shahzad, yeah, you can see him here. So Shahzad, welcome to the program and thanks for your support.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Hamza, for giving us this opportunity to support this I think very exciting keynote by a very eminent speaker and a practitioner.
Great. So before I hand it over to my friend Shahzad Shahid to formally introduce the speaker and the topic, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge not only the support of TPS but also other very important partners we have, and you can see their logo shortly on your screens. Um, but I begin by acknowledging and extending my very warm welcome and thanks to all the about 400 plus participants. A very distinguished audience we have today, given the importance of the topic. We have, and not only that, banking industry and the financial world has responded well to the program, but also we have received interest from pharmaceutical industry, from cement, from FMCGs, food businesses, manufacturing, automobile. So various, it's a very well represented program. So very glad that digital transformation is really taking off in Pakistan, and the interest in Robin stock is phenomenal. Um, those who have not yet registered may do so at later dates also, and we will be happy to sharing the recording of the video only to those who will register for the program. So the process is very simple, right? Um, I would like to acknowledge the support from our network technology partners, Association Pasha, who have joined us with their support of this program. Our standing partners, IOBM, uh, ACCA Pakistan, CFA Society Pakistan, uh, Interfima, Pasha, Chain Store Association of Pakistan, a very important retail sector which is emerging and expanding despite the COVID situation, and is really transforming from bricks and mortars to e-commerce models. Chain Store Association of Pakistan has 200 members, uh, member companies, and very strong participation has come from them. Um, we have support from NIC, Karachi, B-Filer, Sales Professional Forum. A very important support has always been extended to us by Symmetry Digital, which is an award-winning digital marketing and execution agency. It's an award-winning company. We have support from Business Recorder, the leading Pakistani business newspaper, and the Profit magazine, which is now fairly established and well recognized amongst the serious audience of business and management in Pakistan and to some extent abroad. So with this acknowledgement, I will now request Mr. Shazad Shahid of DBS, who is the session chair, to introduce the speaker and the topic. And after his introduction, Robin will come and speak for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then he will be engaged in a fast-paced question and answer session by the session chair, and various questions have received by us from people who had registered and had advanced sent us the advanced questions. So they had been shared. Most of them have been shared with the speaker also. I hope Robin will have considered those questions while making preparation for his talk. Then Mr. Shizad Shahid will also have a few questions from him. And so, given the permission of time, we'll try to accommodate as many questions as we can. Uh, you can still send in your questions. You will see a Slido app integrated with your with the screens. You can send your comments. We can pick up some of the comments as questions and share with the moderator, with the session chair. And there's a Google Doc form also somewhere on your screens where you can still send in your questions, and they will be forwarded to our session chair in real time. So with this, I hand it over to Mr. Shadad Shahid, chair.
Thank you, Hamza, for this introduction. I'm so excited to have Robin here with us today. And I think as the world is moving towards a less cash society, as the world is moving towards a more digital, more integrated, more data-led society, this the banks and the financial services are set to basically get disrupted this by this technology, the mobile phone, the AI, and other key elements which are going to shape how the society interact with each other. How do we do the commerce? How do we do the purchases? How do we even take our in terms of our setting up budgets and saving money, making the investments. So the opportunity is huge for whoever starts to get into this change mindset, and it will be very unfortunate for anybody who basically stays out of it and assumes that the traditional mindset will continue, because this is not going to be the case, and this is very visible already, the way the digital adoption has been seen across and has multiplied because of this COVID thing. Um, Governments, large organizations, small setups, and even the masses have started to basically get more engaged with these technologies, and for the day-to-day payments and transfers and even banking. TPS is 5 years old company, and we are among, I think, very few of them who actually from day zero have been into the payments business, where ATMs were seen just like digital banks are seen today. And we have always been, a company which develops, products which serves the real business of the customers. And we have seen how interoperability, how technology can help create, the real success for the customers, as well as those banks or banking entities. Today we are servicing through our digital banking software applications and our services. We are servicing clients across the continent, from Europe to Africa, to Middle East, to South Asia. Pakistan is our core country, where we have almost all the top banks and the mid-sized banks using our platform for driving their sort of payment switches. We are now finding a lot of excitement across for our, especially of our digital stack. It basically has the digital wallet system for financial inclusion, or the digital lifestyle, and the digital middleware and digital assets like mobile app and web. we are supporting some very amazing initiatives and fintechs from Europe and other regions, which actually want to have the global single currency account, as well as who basically wish to you use our platforms as a white label wallet issuance and the digital acceptance. This is the stage is set, and we are an enabler through our technology, through our consultant style services, and we really wish to have the entire benefit through the technology by TPS, by somebody else. That is something else, but I think we have an amazing time, and this is the most appropriate time to start. If somebody has not started, the whole idea that me and Hamza talked about, and we have been actually working with him for the past few years, is to create awareness across the society, different segments and different verticals, and help them understand the key, help them understand how to move forward in this digital arena, and how can we have the right people come and share their experiences. I think today's session is I'm personally very excited to moderate and support, because Robin has a first-hand experience of how one of the most popular and successful banks in terms of digital transformation, DBS Singapore, happened. What were the key factors that drove their success? How they were able to manage the mindset, the traditional mindset, how they managed to convert the customers, and what are the key takeaways. And I'm sure that today we will be able to ask him a lot of questions that we all have in our mind about how can the banks today in our part of the world capitalize on that experience, that learning, and how can we basically have the same successful transformation. Because it is not only technology. I think this is the technology, people, processes, and mindset. They all come together under a framework which help with the success. And I, as Shahzad, and we as TPS, look forward to learn today from Robin, and I'm sure that we'll be able to continue this journey of learning and and utilizing that learning into real execution. With this, I want to pass on, the control to our Mr. Robin. Over to you, and look forward to an amazing next 40 minutes of insights.
Work with me for just a moment.
All right.
Imagine the scenario. Inside your organization, there's a whisper of something new. Everyone has started to gather together. And as they come into the town hall meeting, the CEO walks onto the stage and the music starts to play. The CEO looks out to his audience and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've invited you here today for the launch of our new digital strategy. It is a strategy that will be good for each and every one of you. It will be good for our customers and good for our shareholders. But I alone can't make it happen. I need each and every one of you to come together, not just a department, not just as a team, but as a family. Because only as a family can we make our strategy come alive." And he turns to the audience and says, "Are you with me?" And everyone's shouting and cheering. And as the music fades out, two guys at the back of the room go, "What was all that about? I don't know, but there's a free lunch. Let's go and get something to eat." On any given day, somewhere in the world, there's a CEO launching the new strategy. But after all the excitement, all the fanfare, what percentage of digital strategies are successfully implemented? It's showing us today that 1/3 are successful. In other words, 2/3 of all the new digital strategies that are being launched, when it's no longer even a business differentiator, but for many companies, it's there just to survive, not thrive, only 1/3 are succeeding. And this comes from our own research in Bridges, from people like Forbes, McKinsey, and IBM. And what's going to be my pleasure to share with you is the challenge of how to get it right. And if we're failing at something 2/3 of the time, then we need to think and act differently. So in the short time we have together, my focus is some of the time you're going to go, huh? And disagree with me, which is good, because I want to challenge and shake up the status quo. So let me first of all step back and thank Hamza for setting up and arranging and giving me the opportunity to share the excitement of the launch of the new book. I've had the pleasure of partnering with TerraBiz now for over a decade. Every year I've been in different parts of Pakistan, obviously not the last year because of COVID. And I'd like to thank Shahzad very much for a very kind introduction. TPS is very much your digital banking and payment partner you can trust. They have a fantastic focus in digital payments and banking technology, and they enable digital financial service providers. They are a financial service provider across the continent with a very mature software and products that drive results. So thank you for TPS for that invitation, for supporting, and Shahzad for the introduction. Just to add on a little bit, I've had the opportunity on many occasions to be in different parts of Pakistan. Today, I'm presenting from home in Singapore, where I've been for almost 30 years. I'm originally from Scotland, but the last 35 years have been based in Hong Kong and mostly Singapore, so very much Asian focused. I've also had the opportunity to live and work in New York and Sydney before I settled here. And I was a regional VP in Citigroup up until 2000. And one of my colleagues was a gentleman called Piyush Gupta. Piyush is now CEO of DBS for the last 12 years. And when I left Citigroup, as much as I love banking, I started Bridges, which focuses on strategy implementation. And then in 2014, while I was working with DBS and the largest luxury company in the world, I saw them both focusing on digital, and that implementing digital was very different to previous strategy implementations. So 2014, I pivoted, and for the last 7 years, I very much focused on what it takes to implement digital transformation. And out of that was the catalyst when talking to Piyush that allowed us to research and write the book. And I was given 2 years exclusive access to the senior leaders and the C-suite to find out and write the book. We're going to kick off with a quiz, and it's either a fact or a myth. So I'm going to show you 5 statements. And when you see the screen change to orange, it means it's an interactive component of the presentation. So this is a warm-up quiz that gives us a little bit of the agenda as well. A digital vision is a necessity to succeed in digital transformation. Fact or myth? And please do, you can put in the comments box an F or an M, and I can see the general response. So it is a fact. With so much involved under digital transformation, you need a clear driving vision that shows you what's going on. It's important that all departments are aligned. To give you an example, I was working with a bank in South Africa, and when I first started with them, the problem they had was because there was no digital vision, everyone came to the sessions like design thinking with their own goals and objectives. So they were competing rather than collaborating. So it's critical to have a digital vision that aligns the whole organization. Question 2. Not all customers need to become digital customers. Fact or myth? And again, it's a fact. Depending on your business and your market and segments, you identify those customers who are early adopters. If some of you remember the book Crossing the Chasm. So we look for those who want to become digital customers, and we work with them first because it gives you the success. It shows you what's working and what's not. But some industries, there are customers who don't want. And we're talking about a bank today. So for example, in Singapore, there are still some customers of DBS to this day who still go to the branch with their pay book and they want to print how much they have in their account. Question number 3. Younger employees are most acceptable to adopting digitalization. This is a myth and has been the downfall of many digital transformations where we only target on younger employees. And there was one company I was working with in Scotland who had exactly this problem. They assumed that only young people would adopt. Adopting digitalization is age indiscriminate. Question 4 or 5, penultimate question. Gets a bit harder. Business leaders are accountable for technology targets. Fact or myth? It's a fact. And this is one of the most powerful ways you can break down silos in any business, in any market. In the past, the business leader used to identify the goals and then sit down with technology and say, okay, how can you support me? Gone. Today, business and technology come to the table at the same level, and they have the same objectives and the same measures. And even technology is bringing revenue to the table. So they're equal partners. This is critical for breaking down silos. And the final question for today, from digital, well, not from today, but in the myth or fact, from digitalization, and this one's more tricky, revenue savings are greater than revenue generated. Fact or myth? Isha, thank you for responding. This is a myth. And it's only something we've started to see in the last few years. Initially, there's massive savings to be made as we apply robotic process automation, RPA, chatbots, and automate a lot of our processes. But over the long run, we're now seeing from digital companies who have gone from traditional to digital that the top line is greater than the bottom line. What I mean by that is once you lock in your digital customers, they spend more with you. And I'll give you a simple example. Many countries use Amazon. And once you're familiar on using Amazon, you go and you use it more frequently. So once you're comfortable with the platform, we've seen in digital that the increase of business goes up more than what the savings are. So with that introduction of the quiz, let me just talk briefly about why digital transformation is so tough. And I've seen this when I've been in Karachi and other parts of the country, as well as, around the world. And in 2018, I researched in one of my other companies. I now run 3 companies, and we looked at the state of digital across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And from our research, we identified that digital, the biggest challenge was it was blowing up the way business was operating. Now, in the past, we've made tweaks or adjustments. We've applied quality or Six Sigma or lean manufacturing, which has, adjusted the business model. But in digital, it's about reinventing the way we work. And there are 3 big challenges, 3 key reasons why digital transformation fails 2/3 of the time. The first one is that it requires whole business transformation. So it's not just about tweaking your back-end processes, putting in chatbots. It's about redefining, as I just said, your whole business model. The second big challenge is culture. You have to let go of the old values, beliefs, and ways of working. And for many, this is extremely hard. And the third is senior leaders have to change, the way they run the organization. Now, this is, extremely tough for many leaders who are used to, for example, walking into meetings and telling people what to do. But those days are gone. Because in digital transformation, it starts at the top, but the implementation happens bottom up. You're running hackathons, design thinking, customer journey mapping, and it's the employees on the front line who are making the changes. Also, senior leaders are no longer the most knowledgeable person in the room because we're all learning about digital at the same time and at the same rate. So these are the top 3 reasons why digital transformation is failing. And I sat down with the CEO of DBS, a gentleman called Piyush Gupta, and we were chatting, and I said, such a fantastic story, I'd love to share it. So in the presentation, I've got a few provocative questions. With the over 400 people we have today, I'm going to only be able to put the questions out there and not discuss them with you. But one of the first thoughts you should have is what needs to change in your leader's mindset to transform to digital. So how do leaders need to think different? For example, eliminating that we need, signatures of approval, eliminating bureaucracy, getting rid of meetings that don't add value. So the content today is in the book that I'm delighted to have just launched. And Hamza has already held up his copy, and I've been able to send a few over to him. Okay. And the book has been phenomenally well received. It's already in the top 10 on Amazon after just 14 days. This is not the story, though, of a bank transformation. It's a story of a traditional company becoming digitally driven. But I will introduce DBS first for those who are not familiar. DBS is one of the banks in Singapore, stands for Development Bank of Singapore. And you can see here a snapshot. And Piyush took over as CEO in 2009 and literally transformed not only the bank, but the way banking is done around the world. How did they do it? Well, they were firstly recognized by the most prestigious banking awards in the world as the best bank, and they have been for the last 3 years. Harvard Business School published the top 20 digital transformations of the last decade. And in the top 10, there were only 2 companies that were not digital natives, Ørsted in Denmark and DBS from Singapore. So it was fantastic that they achieved the top 10. And Piyush was recognized by Harvard as one of the top 100 CEOs in the world. Last year was obviously, for DBS, like every other company, a turbulent time. But the bank was extremely pleased that despite the challenges, their total income remained stable at about 10 billion US dollars. And that resilience was because of all the hard work they had done. So let me go to the agenda. We're going to transform talk about how you transform your technology, your customer, and your culture. So in 2018, I first approached Piyush about writing the book, and this was him and I in his office. The catalyst for why the bank transformed was a perfect storm. They were just coming out of the global financial crisis. There was research at the time that said 74% of people preferred having dental surgery than going to a branch. It's like, really? And Piyush, as he told me, sat down with Jack Ma from Alibaba, who scared the bejesus out of him. He said just the way Jack was thinking scared the bejesus. So along with the board, they were very supportive. They gave the leaders 200 million Singapore dollars and said, go and experiment on digital. And they did. Okay. So the first thing the leaders did is they recognized they needed a strong purpose. And it's called making banking joyful. And some of the slides that I can share with you that I have permission, I will send through as a PDF. So you see the image that summarized their new strategy. Now, first of all, making banking joyful. It's like, huh? You don't associate banking with joyful. In fact, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, let's do banking. But this was the opportunity the leaders recognized. They saw that currently banking was painful, so let's make it the opposite, joyful. And the technology provided the opportunity to make banking invisible. So that was very much the focus, leveraging the technology to make the banking invisible. To make sure everybody was aligned to the digital vision, they updated their scorecard, and 20% went specifically to the new strategy, which internally was called Making Banking Joyful. So they focused on the acquisition of customers through digital, how much people were transacting on their digital platforms, and how engaged people were. So how often, how frequently they were using them. They also had 3 critical successes early on that built the momentum and showed what was possible. Digibank came out of the very first hackathon the bank ever ran. And the winning pitch in the hackathon was to open a branchless bank in India where you could open an account in just 90 seconds. Digibank opened up and is now open not only in India, but also Indonesia. DBS Payla was the introduction of a digital wallet, which has been the most successful in Singapore. And POSB Smart Buddy, this one's a little bit, They created a watch that allowed school children to use digital payments. Now, Well, the consumer bank identified a pain point of your children coming to you every day going, Mommy, Daddy, I need lunch money. And you're looking in your purse, your wallet. So they wanted to eliminate a customer pain point. By giving the children the digital payment, first they had to align the hawkers, the school, the parents, the government, and they got that done. And today, just to fast track the story, what's lovely is in Singapore, school children eat 20% less sugar, because now we can track what they're paying for and what they're buying and guide them to eating more healthy. But to implement making banking joyful, there are 3 strategic principles. And these were becoming digital to the core, which is focusing on your technology, embedding yourself on the customer journey, which was about making DBS invisible, and creating a 30,000 startup, which was about changing the culture. And I'm just going to highlight from these 3 areas. So once again, yes, this is based on DBS, but it's about a traditional company transforming to be digitally driven. And what were their first 3 challenges? Their technology was predominantly outsourced, so they had to take ownership of it and insource it. They wanted to move to being cloud native, and they wanted to accelerate the cadence of development, the speed. So this picture today, is not very different from what many companies have done, but back in 2014, it was pioneering. So you'll recognize many of the language going from waterfall to agile, manual to DevOps, projects to platforms as example. But what they did, what was unique, was they benchmarked against and visited leading tech companies. And to help bankers think like techies, they adopted a phrase saying, what would Jeff do? And as you can see from the picture, what would Jeff Bezos do from Amazon? Now, why Amazon? Because Jeff Bezos is known for being extremely customer obsessed. But a phrase, even though it caught on across the bank, is not enough. You need the structure. So they learned best practices from the leading tech companies in the West. And they used the acronym Gandalf to summarize it. And you can see on the screen, I'll give you just, from Google, they adopted the importance of open source software. From Amazon, the importance of cloud platforms. From Apple, the importance of design. And the D in the middle is DBS. Now, I won't have time today, but for those of you involved in technology, these were the 5 elements that drove the re-architecture from traditional to support creating a core platform that drove the digital transformation. And today, as the bank continues to evolve, it's gone for designing for ops to designing for no ops to designing for AI ops. Around the world, we're seeing that the engine of a company is no longer people working in operations, but AI. Which takes me to the customer. What were the challenges to become customer obsessed? Delivering a delightful, hassle-free customer experience, having the highest customer satisfaction scores, and building ecosystems. This could be you, it could be any company. So the first question the team asked in this field was, what does digitalization mean to our customers? And the important change was banks have been notoriously bad at designing the process and then getting the customer to fit into the process. But the bank leaders stepped back and said, hang on, if we're going to be customer obsessed, we start and end with the customer. So this is called an outside-in approach rather than an inside-out. So they looked at the everyday life and goals of their customers, and then they customized and built around what the customer wanted. But how do you know what the customer wanted? So they had to increase dramatically the time, energy, and resources they spent working with customers. So they moved from being product focused to customer centric. And today across the bank, customer journey mapping is the default approach to solving customer challenges and employee challenges. And they also adopted the learning from Clayton, the late Clayton Christensen. And they asked, what is the job to be done? So they recognized that people don't want a car loan. People don't want a mortgage. They want their new car. They want their dream home. So they focused and they disciplined these employees to really deliver to the customer the job to be done. And while delivering it, they eliminated customer pain points. And this is very much part of our digital transformation language. So I'll give you just a couple of examples. The bank was notorious for long queues. So an early solution back in 2015 was, instead of standing in line waiting to get to the counter, you applied on your phone to get a number, and 5 minutes before your number was going to come up in the branch, you were sent a text message. And what did that mean? It means you could walk around, go for a coffee, meet your friends, go shopping, and you didn't have to wait in the branch physically to get for the service. So this was an early solution. They were also one of the first banks to introduce video teller machines. So, for like replacing a card, they could do it through the video tellers. And they also used predictive analytics to eliminate the problem of cash outs. Cash outs is a banking term. When you go to the ATM, because there's no cash available. So they went in 2010 from every 3 months having cash outs to, within 2017, now every 55 years. So for the customer, they focused on customer journeys, pain points. But what does digitalization mean to the employees? You have to give them the means, the tools to transform, to change the business model. For DBS, they introduced hackathons in 2015. Hackathons are a 2-day when you come together, brainstorm to come up with digital solutions. And it's not just your company, but you invite in startups. You invite in, coders who help you come up with new solutions. So the hackathons were tremendously successful in empowering employees to change the way they were working. And the bank also introduced design thinking. Now, there are a few different formats of design thinking. The bank used 4D framework, which is discover, define, develop, and deliver. So gather and synthesize your insights and inspirations and discover, then define the opportunity, develop by experimenting on solutions, minimum viable products, and then deliver the concept. Now, here's a question for you. In which of the 4 areas do you spend at least 50% of your time? In which of the 4 areas do you spend at least 50% of your time? I was conducting a session yesterday and I got define, then develop, and deliver. And nobody said the right one, which was discover. If you're truly customer obsessed, 50% of your design thinking is about getting to know not just what your customer is saying, but their emotions, their thoughts. And it's bringing that back to the war room, either virtually or physically, to then do define, develop, and deliver. And for many organizations, this is a big change in their approach. So instead of going to a meeting assuming what the customer wants, you verify it through face-to-face or chats or virtual calls with your customers. And I'd be amiss if I didn't just on the customer talk about the importance of API, application program interfaces, that build ecosystems. Whether you're sitting in Karachi or Singapore or London, today we work in a hyper-connected world. And to be able to offer your customer a full experience, it's about collaborating with other organizations. DBS was the first bank to launch the API platform. Today, it has over 1,000 live APIs connecting with other organizations. So for example, you can now go on their website and buy and sell your car. Huh? You never went to a banking website to buy a car before, but this is how the experience is changing. And just the other month, they launched their cryptocurrency exchange as a new platform. Which takes me to the final area I'm going to share with you today, which is about creating your startup culture. And you can see that I've put a line through what was originally 22,000. Instead of just changing the number, I wanted to show how they've now increased to 30,000 employees. What were their challenges? They wanted to continue to transform the culture, to continually experiment and innovate and create the happiest workforce. And one of the questions they asked early on, it was actually in their 2015 senior leaders retreat, was what is the largest roadblock to our digital transformation? And the answer for DBS, meetings. Not the technology, not the customer. It was internally. They had too many meetings that weren't adding enough value, that didn't start on time, that went late, that were not effective. So the bank introduced a governance called Mojo, where MO stands for meeting organizer and JO stands for joyful observer. And the meeting organizer was responsible for making sure that the meeting was using data, had a fixed agenda, started and finished on time, everybody was involved, so share of voice, and then summarized. The Joe was responsible for giving feedback to the meeting organizer. This transformed the way meetings were conducted. Now you can see in the picture, it's an app. So it won't surprise you that the leading digital bank of the world has an app for this. What might surprise you is you can download either on Galaxy or Apple, you can download the app, simply DBS Mojo, and you'll find the app and you can use it for your own meetings. They also looked at how people collaborate. So they wanted to roll out agile. They wanted to break down silos, and it's critical to change the environment. Now, this doesn't look like banks. Banks are normally cubicles and people working on their own. Joy Space was the name given where people created their own theme for their own department. So you can see in Singapore, a very open area for meetings and discussions. The group audit created a theme around Formula One, and in Hyderabad, they used the train to show that they were on an express journey. So to the final thing I'd like to share with you, the 5 steps for creating a startup culture. And I'm just going to give you a couple of brief examples. It's called the ABCDE approach. A, you have to move towards being agile. So it's not just about technology going from waterfall to agile. It's also about the organization. And one of the first departments that adopted agile was actually audit, because they had to work the audits faster and quicker to be able to keep pace with the business. But the key takeaway, and I mentioned this in the quiz, was the fusion of technology and digital. So today in the bank, the technology head is responsible as much for the business outcomes and vice versa as the business head. The learning organization, I'll give you just a couple of examples so we can stay on time. They eliminated managers' approval for training under $300 US. So in other words, I got to choose which training I wanted to do, but they were very clever about it. The only rule was that when you came back from the training, you had to share what you learned with your colleagues. They recognized that you can't teach digital transformation in the classroom. So 10% was the learning, but 90% was learning by doing, participating in customer journey or hackathons. And one more example, Piyush wanted to emphasize the fact that anyone should be running digitalization. So the third hackathon they ever ran was for over 40s. And they continue to change and transform. So to learn machine learning, they participated with AWS, and they had a building race cars, simulated race cars, and they had a competition, and DBS was delighted that Ray Go beat the people from Amazon. Now, customer obsessed, you might go, huh? Robin, you just talked about this. So they reinforced how important customer obsession was by putting it in the 5 steps for the culture. And they successfully transformed from the poorest customer service in Singapore in 2010 to 4 years later, having the best that they've maintained. Now, data-driven, I can't do justice today, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of key things. Any traditional organization, it takes a minimum 2 to 3 years to become data-driven. Huh? Why? First of all, you have to clean up your old data, your legacy data. Then you have to build the system and the governance around it. Then you can start training your people to start presenting and using and thinking data. And Samir, who's the Chief Analytics Officer, shared with me, the easy part is the analytics, Robin. He said, but getting people to change their working approach is the hard part. So it's about changing the behaviors. And one of the statements you'll hear Piyush say frequently is the better the data, the better the decisions. So DBS had 3 pillars. They focused on the culture, the use, and then building fit for purpose. Right. And one other key thing I want to share is that they've moved now to having what they call control towers, and it looks like this. So now they track everything. Everything is measured. So they drive app optimization through path analytics and understand customer behavior against the job to be done. And they track and recreate the individual customer to drive contextual marketing. And finally, they wanted bankers to take risk. Now, as bankers, we're trained to mitigate risk, not take risk. So as Paul Coben, the Chief Data and Transformational Officer, said, you've got to build psychological safety. People have to feel safe in taking risk. So that gives you a highlight of how you transform from a traditional to a digitally driven. Let me just pause for a minute. I've shared many different aspects with you on your own. Well, you're on your own, but could you just take 1 minute to reflect what's your singular most important key takeaway from my presentation? So 1 minute, what's your singular most important takeaway? So a couple of closing slides. is you saw earlier that they changed their scorecard because they wanted to show the value of digital customers. And they discovered that digital customers bring in twice the income. So this was a major outcome that drove the performance. And last time I chatted to Pia, she said we still have a lot of work to do when we compare ourselves to the leading tech companies. And they're also today very much focused on sustainability. So I know half an hour after we finish, you've forgotten half of what I said. So it's been my pleasure to be working with TerraBiz now for over a decade with the team. And, we've run many different events in Pakistan. For those who are looking to accelerate their digital transformation, we run and offer digital implementation for leaders. The keynote I've just shared with you is a glimpse into the story and lessons, which is up to a 2-hour presentation. And there's also, for those financial institutions who want to know more about the banking approach, the whole Making Banking Joyful is a 4 90-minute virtual module course that we also offer. Okay. I also, one of the other companies, for those who are interested in strategy implementation, I offer an online course and certification, which you can also find in the QR code here. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to share. We've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to pause to bring it in for Q&A. And Junaid, thank you for that. I can see, based on your experience, what are the stages to a bank's digitalization journey and which stage are Pakistan banks? Well, I know you've got 17 banks in Pakistan, so I can't say where they all are, but I have worked with a few of them. And like many other banks around the world, they're mostly playing catch up with DBS because they are the world's best bank. The banks, I remember speaking at your first ever banking digital transformation conference that TerraBiz hosted and seeing, the journey. So you have been on the journey for a few years. We are starting to make the inroads. I would say, we're still at I would say we're in the middle. If the first stage is awareness, the second stage is building, and then third stage is strategic, I'd say quickly they're just at the building stage. So thank you for the question. Shazad, hey.
Yeah, Robin, I think it has been as exciting, as insightful as we all thought it to be. I loved the Mojo thing because I think the digital transformation starts from how to collaborate and how to convince each other. And I think Mojo is an amazing idea in terms of changing that culture, the mindset, which actually is the real lid on the potential that any organization carry. So, but great insights. I think we now have some 30 odd minutes, and I think this is going to be an interesting session as well, because we'll now pick your brains, Robin, about various elements which people have started. The questions have been coming in for the past few days, and I think I've received a lot of questions today as well. So I'll start with the first question that I have in my mind, and then I've got a lot of questions that I have. But it will start with, is this a fashion statement? Digital transformation is a fashion statement that everybody else is doing it. Is it a FOMO, fear of missing out? Or do you think that countries like Pakistan, where we still say that it's a largely cash-driven economy, the banks make money based on very sovereign-backed lendings. Do you think the banks should fear about not going for the digital transformation as fast as the time merits?
So there are two parts to that question. So let me answer the first one, which is, we've all seen in the last 18 months the impact of the pandemic, and the shift has been that digital transformation has gone almost from being a strategic differentiator to a necessity. So of course, when you can no longer visit your customers or open your store or have people come to campus for like universities, you have to go digital. So now digital has really become a necessity just to survive. So of course, that's it. We all know how that's accelerated the use, and it established it as a way of doing business. To your second part of the question, we know, the limited use of credit cards and the number of people working outside of the cities in Pakistan. It's a very unique market for the banking, and the pace of the transformation is for the banks. They have to ensure that if they're not, they are offering the customers what they want, because quite simply, if they're not able to offer, online banking and to bring their corporate customers on board in a few days rather than a few months, which it typically takes, somebody else will. So just like what you're doing in terms of the excellent work in digital payments, uh, banking has been hard, it's ripe for disruption. And if the banks themselves don't transform, then they will be disrupted. So yes, there is an urgency for them to transform.
Fair, I think very, very fair point. This is high time that the banks understand the writing on the wall, and because the transformation is actually a long process, which takes years to basically really get settled in. The sooner they start, the better it is. Who do you think is the ultimate owner of the digital transformation of an existing non-digital native traditional bank? Is it the bank's CEO or that leadership team, or is it the board and the board chairman?
I'm smiling because just this morning I was finishing an article for a group called Thinkers 50 out of Europe, which is the top 50 management thinkers, and I'm just publishing an article with them. And part of that is who owns digital transformation. So your question is very up. There's a two parts answer to this. Digital transformation strategically is the responsibility of the leaders. So it's the leaders in any organization who have to ask the key question: what does digital mean to our customers and our business? Digital is a very wide adjective. It involves so much, a verb, in terms of, it could be, blockchain. It could be looking at Internet of Things. It could be looking at customer journey mapping or data analytics. So which aspect of digital is most relevant to your customers and yourself is the first part. The second part is then saying, okay, what do we need to do to transform? And the board have to be on board, because in most organizations who are not digital native, there's a massive investment in moving from data center to becoming cloud native, to become, using DevOps, agile, eliminating toil. And this takes a massive amount of initial investment. For example, DBS spends $750 million US per year on its technology. So the board have to be aligned and supporting. But here's the difference. The implementation, as I mentioned earlier, is ground up. So the thinking is top down, but what's different in digital transformation is that it comes from the ground. So the design thinking, the hackathons, the customer journey mapping, the data translation, it's a groundswell of activity. And Pierre said it to me himself. He said, Robin, when I go to my meetings now, I used to go to tell people what to do. Now I go to find out what's happening in my bank, because you have to empower people across your business. And if you participate in a 2-day hackathon and you come out the hackathon, and then you have to go around the organization seeking approval to try out your solution, and you've got to prepare PowerPoints, and you've got to get signatures and budget, it's failed. So people come out the hackathon, they go straight in and fast track, through an accelerator, where they have the empowerment to create the minimum viable product within 90 days. So the top are responsible for the crafting, specifically the senior leaders, the ownership and responsibilities with them, but the implementation is a bottom-up activity. Great question.
So we have a question from our colleague, industry senior, Mujahid Ali, who is a CIO of Allied Bank, one of the top banks in the country. He has a very interesting question, and the question is about DBS took a strategy of digital transformation in Singapore, but it basically had a digital subsidiary, DigiBank, in India. You know, so was it considered to be a challenge to transform a bank in India, because India and Pakistan have in a way similar, infrastructure and culture, or there were some other factors?
I'm sorry, I missed the middle part of that. I lost you a little bit. So what was
question?
I got the question about DigiBank, and what was the question around the setup?
Singapore was digital transformation, but India appears to be a separate subsidiary for digital. What are the key factors that were considered by DBS to not go for the transformation of the existing entity in India?
Okay, so I would tweak the question a little bit. The decision wasn't so much, not to upgrade their current presence in India. It was out of that first hackathon came the suggestion to run a branchless bank, and India was selected as the market because of the potential in the volume of the business. So the decision was not based on, what is our current business model? How do we change it? It was that they identified through their brainstorming an opportunity to run a branchless operation. And then where should we run that? And then the setup of DigiBank, they did it, tremendously fast. I'll give you a couple of examples. They targeted to have no ops. Now, no ops in banking doesn't mean completely 100% with no people, but they wanted to maximize the use of technology as much as possible. They wanted to create the account opening in 90 seconds, but one of their biggest challenges was that India government states, the law states in the country, that you have to physically know the customer. It's what we call in banking KYC, know your customer. So they had no branches. So how could they physically meet with the customer? Now, what I like about this story is the solution to this problem came from legal and compliance. And legal made the suggestion of putting a thumbprint in the coffee shops around India. And they partnered with the coffee shops. And when you went to buy a cappuccino, you then just pressed your thumb on the thumb printer, which cost about $50 and your account was opened. So this was a solution to the challenges they had, but this was took a bit of time to find that solution. So the whole rationale of DigiBank was to show what was possible through digitalization. So the base of it was not, what is our current banking model? It was where can we apply this opportunity that came out of the hackathon, and the success of it drove the initial momentum and traction across the bank. And even to this day, you'll still hear peers, talking and celebrating how well it's done.
Okay, I think very, very pertinent point. An associated question, Robin, is what is your advice to especially the larger banks? Should this go for the speedboat mechanism, set up a digital bank, which is completely digital ground up, or they basically continue to transform the existing bank, or they go for both of them at full pace and full attention as they can manage?
So Shahzad, it's a very pertinent question. And to me, the answer is very straightforward. It's not either or, it's both and. While you're transforming, of course, we still have to maintain our current business. and it takes a major focus. We all know the challenge, those of us involved in consumer banking, for example, of changing your core systems in a consumer bank that impacts so many people. So you have to maintain at the same time your current business while also converting to digitalization. So it's not an either or question, it's a both and. And while you start to change, you identify the key areas, what are most critical to you and your customers. How do you know that? By becoming customer obsessed, starting to do your customer journey mapping, looking at the most critical customer journey maps, and then using the technology to automate them. So it's all happening, many, balls up in the air. You're juggling as you simultaneously. So you saw in my presentation, it wasn't just about building the core platform. It was about becoming customer obsessed and also changing the culture all at the same time. So
Yeah.
is it easy to do? No. If it was, 2/3 wouldn't be failing. But, for banks, we have no choice. For just like tech companies or, a few other industries, the market is moving quickly and the pressure is on to change.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, your answer is that while they have to transform the existing setup, which may be a longer activity, but it has to go on full pace, they must explore setting up a digital bank with the specific customer segment, specific use cases, and specific roadmap, because that can move much faster compared to the existing banks transformation.
Shadad, I'd even tweak that a little bit. I wouldn't say set up a digital bank. I would say converting traditional banking to digital banking. So it's bringing the customers along with them on the journey. It's giving customers what they want, which is faster, more efficient, quicker ways of doing things.
Okay, there's a question from Mohsin Termazi, who is CEO of Finclude. And it's a very interesting question. And this question is, how do you see the corporate and consumer parts of the digital banking business unifying their act to deliver value to the digital bank? Because actually, we often talk about digital retail bank, right? So where is the corporate part, which actually makes a lot of money for the banks and the shareholders?
So it's a great question. And at the heart of the question is focusing on the customer. So, I come from corporate banking and, I know how bad we've been in the past about, telling corporate customers what we need them to do, for example, to bring them on board, which can take 3 to 6 months by the time they filled in all the forms and given all the documentation. The question focuses around what do our customers want, and the customer can be the individual or the corporate, and then redesigning and leveraging the technology. For example, eKYC, know your customer. So in parallel for most banks, the consumer and the corporate will start to make the key changes, and the approach is the same. What are the most important customer journeys? Where are the biggest opportunities? How can we start to make the differences? Now, in some places, they will overlap. So, for example, using cloud, gathering data from the cloud will be consistent across the whole organization. But obviously, they're very different businesses in the way they operate. Corporate, we have letters of credit. In consumer, we're looking at mortgages and loans, very different approaches. So each of the different parts of the bank specifically focus on what needs to be done. Internally, you have the supporting teams, HR, legal, credit, and they're also starting to digitalize. So, in World's Best Bank, the book, you'll read just as much about what HR were doing by using AI for hiring new people, or how legal completely changed the approach for how the bank thought about new customers. So, for example, in the corporate bank, customers had to prove that they weren't trading illegally. Legal said, this is not customer obsessed. We're going to assume that customers are honest, and the burden of proof is on us, not on the customer. So that was a complete reverse psychology of how they thought about corporate customers. So a lot of course, transformation happens, but the consumer and the corporate bank, even though there are some areas of overlap, they're both running in what's most critical to their business, which is very different.
Okay. So I have a question from Adil Tufel Chaudhry. He works for Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank. And his
Yep.
question is about, do you see an end point of the neobanks where they are able to compete with traditional banks on the balance sheet and portfolio level?
Of neobanks,
Yeah, neobanks.
I'm not
Will
using.
the
It's not a term we use. Neobanks are.
So neobanks are also sort of, a digital challenger banks. It's a kind of digital bank without any branches.
Okay, so it's not a term in all the work I've done that we've used out of our world.
Okay. So let's call it a digital bank without branches. And the question, let me repeat the question is, do you see an endpoint of these digital banks where they are able to compete with the traditional banks on balance sheet and portfolio level?
Okay, thank you. So the short answer is no. Um, for the banks are so well established, offering such a full spectrum. One of the comments Piyush made is that he overestimated the impact of fintech from China in 2015, and he made this just a couple of years ago. So the banks we're so well established with so much of a relationship, offering so much to a corporate or to a consumer, that the fully digital banks, will they be able to compete? Close, but not overtake. Why not? Because in banking, there's still currently the older generation or some generations who want to visit the branch, who want, the old style of banking, who want to sit with their RM. So that there's always going to be that's part of the business. It will diminish over the long run, but in the short term, they won't be able to catch up.
Yeah, very, very fair point. So we will continue to have banks in their own space, and they over the time you'll see these digital banks having their own customers, and they become good in terms of balance sheet and portfolio. It is often said that the culture eats strategy for the breakfast. So we talk about strategy a lot, but we know for a fact that unless the culture is changed, regardless how effective is technology, how great is the strategy, the result is not success. So you have met the leadership teams and the board people of banks in Pakistan. What will you suggest to consider to transform the existing people's mindset and improve the culture,
I
when they
like
basically
good
push top to
question.
down?
So I give it one very strong recommendation. Go and visit as soon as you can. Hopefully, by early next year with COVID reducing, go and visit or even do a virtual tour of leading tech companies. See what is possible. It's you can read about it, you can talk about it, but when you actually see how tech companies run their business, it's extremely eye-opening. Just with the potential and the opportunities, and there's so much going on in the world of blockchain, machine learning, AI, and it opens up your eyes to the possibilities. So my top recommendation would be go and visit once you can. In the short term, while you're waiting for that opportunity, and because you can't physically go, do virtual visits, talk to leaders in leading tech companies. And then the third one has to be, of course, buy World's Best Bank, and it will give you a great insight into how DBS did it. I had to throw that one in, Shazad, sorry.
No, I agree that this amazing book will certainly help create a better culture. but having a direct sort of visit and observation is going to be helpful. And you believe that it's not only for the top people, but those who actually are going to be at the helm of affairs, they also need to have the direct experience and exposure on how the new tech oriented organizations function for them to realize the potential in their own banks to transform.
Yeah, and
Fair point.
if I can tweak what you just said just a little bit, just add on to it, it's also about giving them the confidence to show them what's possible. So, we talked earlier about digibank. Why was that so critical for DBS? It convinced the unconvinced. I've worked with a lot of banks. I work with central banks in Indonesia and Russia. I work with banks and FIs in many different markets. And a lot of the initial challenge is just convincing people what is potentially possible. So it's also about getting those early successes are essential.
Yeah. So another question, Robin, is uh, do you have, I mean, cryptocurrency, you talked about cryptocurrency exchange set up by DBS, but you know for a fact that a lot of this part of the world is not very open to these public cryptocurrencies, which are anonymous in
Yeah.
nature. Rather, the fiat currency, the central bank backed digital currency is going to see more traction, even by the European central bank as well is throwing its weight behind it. So how do you see the cryptocurrency, those public like Bitcoin or Ethereum or the digital currency central bank
Yeah.
backed? How relevant it is to the future banks?
So Taha, thank you for this one. I see you posted this question. Let me first of all say that I'm not a cryptocurrency specialist. It's not my field. What I have seen and what I've learned from Piyush and what the bank is doing is the focus is on blockchain rather than something like Bitcoin or the digital currency itself. Blockchain is phenomenal. As an example, think about sustainability. Now, in terms of suppliers, you're using blockchain. We're able to know, where the suppliers, what's going on. Secondly, for one of my shipping clients, shifting to blockchain has been tremendously successful in accelerating and eliminating the amount of paperwork time it takes. So, will cryptocurrencies take off? Yeah, but what will be the foundation will be around the blockchain. So blockchain is definitely here to stay. It's going to continue to grow as the next few years. I've seen it with Pakistan central bank. I know it in other countries. Many central banks are struggling to find what works, what doesn't. So we're very much at the early stages of blockchain, but I think over the next few years we'll see dramatic improvements and use of it, especially around sustainability and corporate in the corporate business.
I mean, in Pakistan, there are 30 odd microfinance institutions.
Yeah.
Have you seen, and they've got a very different customer base where the literacy level is low and digital adoption is not there, unlike those which actually bank with
In
the
other
traditional
countries.
banks.
Yeah.
So do you have seen examples across where the microfinance banks and institutions have been able to change the mindset and help adopt the digital instruments for their customers, or they have to wait for another 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it both and? I mean, the banks are helping the customers, but the customers are also helping the banks. So just as much, the customers are demanding, we want this faster, more efficient, paperless, or our companies themselves are becoming paperless and sustainability friendly. So it's happening from all directions.
Okay, fair point. So one more question about culture. So there are different models adopted by different banks. So I want to understand from your experience. Some banks that we have seen have a separate department set up under a chief digital officer, and then there's a confusion across what will happen to the IT department and the CIO that is functioning on
Yeah.
technology, and there's certain shared resources, and you can understand those apprehensions about future set in, and which actually at times slow down and at times it does help. What has been your experience? What is that magic formula for the transformation? Who should actually, from technology standpoint, run it?
So the short answer is everyone. Digital is everyone's responsibility. It can't be one department. That's a short answer. But stepping back, because digital is such a it's an industrial revolution. It's a new way of working. We're changing the whole business model. So initially, we have a dedicated department who drives the awareness across the organization, and not just for banks. This is for any company. So you set up, your chief a digital office or a transformation office, and they're responsible for driving it as you build the awareness and the knowledge. But as it becomes embedded into the DNA of the company and it's changed the behaviors and the way you operate, then the target of that dedicated department is to put themselves out of business, because everyone needs to be part of the digital transformation. And the story I shared earlier of how legal solved the problem for Digibank in India, everyone has to be involved, because you never know where the solutions are going to come from or the support. So this is not just about customer-facing departments or middle office. It's about everyone involved in it. So the role of the dedicated department, whatever name you give it, is there at the beginning to get the excitement, to get the engagement, but more importantly, to build the knowledge and the understanding. And within 3 to 4 years, their goal should be to put themselves out of business.
Okay, so there's a question from Mr. Khalid Noor, who is CFO of Mactor International. Mactor is a pharmaceutical firm. The question is, where should we start this transformation journey, and what is the end state that we should have in the mind?
Okay, so if you haven't started yet, great place to go is buy World's Best Bank. But if you haven't started yet, the most critical question is, what does digital mean to your customers and your business? So we've talked about many different aspects under the umbrella of digitalization, but what is most important? So for example, in pharmaceutical, it's been very much about accelerating our research, our sharing of information, using AI and building the algorithms that allows us to analyze massive amounts of data. So what does digitalization mean to your business and to your customers and to your culture? That's where you're starting, thinking, just initially thinking about what are the opportunities. And then once you start getting going, it's then, there are plenty of pharmaceuticals going through the transformation right now. And, it's picking up the best practices, avoiding many of the mistakes others are making so that you succeed where your competition are failing.
Okay. Robin, there's a very interesting question, and if you think you can answer that from Telenor. And Telenor Pakistan, Mohammed bin Salim, who is a senior manager, strategy and projects. Okay, to somebody who is also into strategy. The question is, would be great if we could have a quick financial overview of the P&L of the organization pre and post transformation. So does it really help the balance sheet? Like the similar question that Adil asked earlier, has DBS benefited from this digital transformation? They're clearly spending a lot of money on this whole process. But has it really given, the value to the shareholders?
Yeah, I didn't show one particular slide just because I had limited time with you today. But from 2017 to 2020, the bank had double-digit growth. Obviously, 2020, I showed you right at the beginning, it was a tougher year, but their operating income maintained. So the bank, phenomenal growth over the 3-4 years when it first really started embedding digital into the business, and no doubt that will continue. So absolutely, you can see it on their P&L. They publish their scorecard, they publish the numbers. You can see the growth they've had since over the first few years of the digital transformation, bar 2020 with the pandemic. So absolutely. And then you saw the final slide I showed you. The digital customers bring in double the income.
Okay. Do you have any idea how much? I mean, there's a question about how does digitization affect the employment? And there's a fear that the higher digitization, the lower employee base that the organization requires, right? And it does. You understand that it
Yeah.
could create a bit of situation for the people at the top to implement a change. What, in your experience with DBS and the organizations, how does the employee per account change as the bank gets more digital over time?
So I missed the final bit, but I think what you're asking is the relationship between digital and employees. And my only surprise is that it's taken this long for the question to come up, because I speak at many digital conferences, including the ones in Karachi, and one of the most common questions, if not the most common question, is, am I going to lose my job? The answer is yes, unless you make yourself relevant in the new world. Now, you saw on one of the slides I was showing that DBS, initially it had 18,000 employees when it started in 2014, its digital transformation. Today it has 30,000. But for example, they identified in 2017 that 1,200 jobs were going to disappear. These were jobs that people were servicing the old manual way of operating. So they spent $20 million over 5 years retraining the staff and upgrading their skill sets. But the onus of responsibility is not just on the company. In today's world, the responsibility lies with the individual, because we can all, we have the internet, we can watch a TED Talk, we can read a book, we can download on Kindle. I almost forgot. So, my ebook is just a promotion price to the end of the week at 99 cents if you buy it on Kindle, on Amazon. So, whatever choice of learning you do, you have a responsibility to upgrade your skill set, to learn how to do Python or SQL, different forms of coding, or to learn how to, algorithms, or to learn data analytics. And individuals are responsible as much as the company is. But more importantly, I studied the top 20 digital transformations of the last decade, and their headcount went up by, on average, 286%, which means, everyone said, jobs, we're going to lose jobs. We're losing, what's changing is we're no longer doing operational jobs. The focus now is on providing value.
Yeah, so I think staying relevant is important for both the employees and the businesses. So this is a challenge common to both, and both have to make their own efforts and own investments to stay relevant and continue earning. A question from one of my colleagues at TPS is, everybody is talking about and trying to do digital transformation. What should we do to set ourselves apart from others?
Okay. Well, it obviously, actually, it's a good question. So it threw me for a second. But the first thing I would do is be aware of the biggest mistakes that most companies are making. And it just, DBS got so much right. So just last week, I was talking to Chief Digital Officer of one of the largest banks in Malaysia, and they had outsourced their technology transformation. And with the vendor, they ended up arguing about what the final product should be, and they ended up almost taking them to court. And this has delayed the transformation by 12 months. So, that frustration, and then I looked at DBS, and, early on, they shifted from outsourcing to insourcing their technology. So you have to identify, the best practices that are right for you. There's so much going on. There's plenty of publications, not just the world's best bank, but other books and other material coming out, sharing what's working. So the most critical thing, and for yourself in DBS, that is, what is unique to your business? What can we learn from the successes? And how can we avoid the pitfalls? And if you remember right at the beginning, I introduced 2/3 of digital transformations fail to deliver on their 50% of their strategic goals. So the challenges are numerous, and it's the smart organizations who are learning from the best, and not within your industry. Look outside of your industry. So benchmark against other organizations outside your industry, and then it's how fast you learn those lessons and embed them into your own DNA.
I have, so as TPS, we have been working with various organizations, banks, as well as
Yeah, you've been
fintech.
doing a great job.
And our experience has been that whichever organizations we partner with, we have success, and those which actually engage us on a project, we have a fight on the scope and the boundaries. So
Same.
I think you are correct about this Malaysian example. This is actually more of a partnership rather than outsourcing a fixed scope, because the scope can't be really fixed and it has to continue evolving. Any a sensitive question, Pakistan, State Bank. State Bank is very dynamic, but any recommendation for State Bank of Pakistan to support the banks and the non-banking entities offer the digital financial services as per the speed as, for example, Singapore and UK?
So let me just take that back. I wouldn't specifically talk about the state bank for yourself, but I do work with a lot of state banks in different countries. And what I'm delighted to see is that the state banks are receptive to what's happening. Now, what do I mean by that? They recognize that banking is going through a revolution. And this is actually a term I use it at the back of the book to describe DBS becoming the world's best bank. They didn't just change their own bank, they revolutionized the way we do banking. And most, well, I don't know most, but many central banks are today recognizing that they have to change also the way they support and work with the bank. So, for the state bank, it's critical. They recognize, but that the changes are coming, that they have to be at pace with them. And from the work I'm doing with state banks, we are seeing that start to happen.
Okay, no, we can certainly see State Bank coming up with the digital bank license. The draft is out already. And I really hope that we'll be able to have the digital banks, at least the digital retail banks, as quickly as we can see them positively affecting the financial services sector of the country and accelerating the financial inclusion. We actually have anyway gone a few minutes beyond the allotted time, but Hamza was kind enough to permit me do that, because
Thank you,
we still have a lot of questions coming in, but I really have to stop here and would really love to give you a couple of minutes, Robin, if you wish to summarize things as a takeaway, for all our listeners and those who will listen and watch this program after this live event.
Well, Shadat, let me first of all say shukran to you for doing an excellent job of facilitating it. I know how tough that is. So thank you. You've done fantastic on that. Thank you also for supporting today's event. That was very good of you. I'll leave you with one final thought. And this is actually the opening quote in the book, The World's Best Bank, A Strategic Guide to Digital Transformation. And that is, it's not about having a digital strategy, but a strategy in a digital world. Now, what do I mean by that? Don't focus on just digital. Yes, digital is all-encompassing and critical, but you need to be looking at a bigger peripheral. So it's about having a strategy in a digital world. You need to be aware of what your competition are doing, what changes in the market, what new technologies are coming through, what is happening. You've also got to be aware of geopolitical and other issues like, the pandemic that are impacting us. So keep a broader view, and it's all about having a strategy in a digital world.
Thank you, Ravins. Thank you so very much. I can't really wait to have your book in my hand. Hamza has promised that the book will be with me very, very shortly. I would love to read it all and really enjoy the time.
I
Uh,
look forward to getting your feedback.
we'll certainly be in touch with you and look forward to have more conversations and the transformation for the objectives that it really means for. Hamza, over to you. And thank you for permitting us 10 minutes beyond allotted time.
Well done. You did a great job. Hamza, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for setting up and arranging today. You need to go off mute. The most common quote of last year. You're on mute.
Right. Robin, what a delightful, insightful talk you delivered. Thank you for that. Um, I hope and I believe that our audience who have joined today and who will be watching later on will leave more enlightened and more informed and more wiser because you have put in all your years of experiences and to this book, and the gist of that book has come out in the form of the keynote that you had just delivered. So thank you very much, and keeping in view the stream of questions that we were getting throughout the course of the talk, and even earlier. And many of them have been very ably shared with you by our session chair, Mr. Shaitat Shahid. I think this proves that the subject is very important, and in the pandemic era, uh, it has done wonders. And what could have been achieved in few years looks likely that will be achieved in few months. Um, so, TPS, thank you, Shadad, for supporting and for being an expert moderator. I think the Q&A session was equally important and interesting as the talk. So yes, I just would like to make a little announcement that we will shortly be sending out books to a few people who had registered earlier. Um, and Shadad, your book will soon be with you, hopefully, inshallah, by tomorrow. Um, and people who have registered will shortly be receiving a feedback form on their email, and would really like them to record their feedback, which will help us improve our proposition in future events. And Robin, thank you very much for being with us, not only today, but as you mentioned, for the last 10 years. You have been, expanding our horizon, our knowledge base, and you are fairly now a recognized name in Pakistan. I think DBS is quite famous in Pakistan. It's quite known now, thanks to your, research and your uh, uh, uh,
Shukran.
publication and
And
your case studies.
inshallah, next year we can all be together, inshallah.
Inshallah, and this year at the Digital Banking Conference, we would like to engage you once again because many aspects are there, and many unanswered questions can then be taken there. Uh, so our banks are, I think at one stage or the other, um, at some point of time, they all of them are modernizing and changing and quite fast, and they are transforming really. And DBS case study uh, will definitely help all of us, not only in the banking sector, but it's just a case study which I believe has been recognized by Harvard Business School as one of the top 10 successful digital transformation in the last decade.
Yeah.
So So as you can see, not only banks but other sectors have also been fairly represented here today. With this, I would like to thank everyone who joined us live and those who will be joining us later. And please do fill out the quiz feedback form when we send it to you today. And the presentation slides, as soon as we receive them from Mr. Robin, will be uploaded and will be shared for us as they will constantly provide us key takeaways. This talk will be also available to the registered participants, and inshallah, more such sessions will be coming up. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Shazad, and thank you to all the distinguished audience and the supporters and partners. Thank you very much. With this, we take a bow. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Hamza.
Bye bye. Thanks, Shazad.
Bye-bye.